Good evening. We're heading to medieval Europe to see how castles were really built. Not from romance, but from logistics, cash flow, weather fights, and slow, risky work that turned stone into power in mud and cold, with lords counting coins, stewards bargaining for lime, and a master mason calling the line. The scariest enemy wasn't an army. It was rain, rot, and payroll day after day. Cold grass slicks a rough hill as workers gather in the gray before sunrise. A master mason stands at the center with his staff, while the Lord Steward checks a small tablet and purse. A damp wool hood resting on your shoulders holds a little warmth, and torches spit and fade as the sky goes from black to iron. This hill means reach. This place must control the ground, secure the road, and house power. A river bend sits below, a track runs along it, and a ford pulls carts through the shallows. A castle here will warn rivals, steady the market, and give the Lord a bed, a vault, and a voice. A waxed cloth plan unrolls across a plank laid on 2 barrels. Inked lines show a keep, a gate, and a ring of towers, neat even in the damp. The master smooths the corners, taps the slope with his staff, and nods toward a stand of birch. The site is a blank ledger waiting for entries. He lifts a knotted cord, calls for a measuring rod, and watches a plumb bob settle. Stakes go in with dull thuds, a mallet rising and falling in a steady rhythm. A rope stretches tight between them and sings a thin note as the steward listens, and chalk drags across wet soil to mark a pale path. Because a wall will obey the line, therefore a crooked string means a crooked future. Apprentices hold pins and spare stakes. The mason checks the angle at the corner and lifts his hand for hush. A cart creaks on the track below, wheels wet with mud, and 2 oxen tilt their heads at the hill. Quarrymen lean on picks and wedges, their boots crusted with lime and clay. They wait for the signal that tells them which face to bite first. A water carrier sets down a sloshing bucket, and a carpenter shoulders an auger and a narrow saw. The steward mouths a short prayer, hands trace a quick cross, and the first tools rise. No shout follows. The work favors patience over show. Chalk dust clings to fingers and sleeves as lines firm up. A boy trots back to the cart with news, and the ox driver clicks his tongue, easing the team forward on the gentler track. The master checks the fall of the ground toward the river and nods to the clerk to note it. Wind stirs the birch leaves and carries the smell of wet stone and wood smoke. The hill answers with silence and small sounds of leather, iron, and breath. First light spills across a marked corner and turns chalk into a thin streak of gold. The mason looks once at the plan and calls for the first trench to break the turf. The day has its shape now, line by line, and the hill begins to accept it. From here, move into how a site gets chosen and what that choice really costs. The master mason plants his boots on a blunt ridge and lifts his staff toward the valley. Wind pulls at your cloak hem, and chalk grit presses under your soles. The air is cold on your cheek, a thin hiss like a cooling kettle. He marks the road that snakes to market, the ford that carts can cross, and the low shelf where a quarry could open. He wants height for sightlines and warning, but not so far that wagons break on the climb. Because high ground controls roads, therefore, taxes and messages follow. Think of it like placing the region's Wi-Fi router. Range helps everyone, but you still need plugs and cables. He kneels at a raw bedrock outcrop and chips it with a hammer. Foundations want hard stone more than a grand view. So he hunts for ground that will not shift. Beautiful views weren't the point. Chalk dust scratches your palm as he rubs a line across a stake. He points to the stream and the dark line of reeds. Water. Access shapes survival risk. So a spring, inside the walls, ranks higher than a sweeping horizon. A river can feed a moat and mills, but only if you can keep a channel under watch. A well means drilling through rock and hauling in carpenters for the winding gear, then guarding the bucket, day and night in a siege. The Lord Steward speaks of rights and notice. A license to crenellate turns bare stone into legal fortification, and the crown will care where it rises. A hill above a royal road draws praise if you serve, and suspicion if you do not. Neighbors with toll rights or grazing claims will protest if the walls choke their trade. Surveyors step in with cords, rods, and a simple siding frame. They paste triangles, throw pegs, and mark the fall of land so rain flows away from the works, drainage trenches, culverts, and a cut for a cart track eat money before a single tower climbs. Oxen strain on rough ramps, carts clatter in ruts, and the first coins vanish into ditches and roadbeds that no minstrel will sing about. Quarrymen test the nearby face, listening for a clean ring and a steady grain. If the stone breaks wrong, even a fine ridge loses its shine, and the team must haul blocks from farther off. Timber for scaffolds and hoardings needs its own road, and its own bend in the stream for floating logs. The site becomes a web of inputs, each one tugging the ledger and the calendar. Markers go in where gateways might sit, and the mason measures the line of a ditch that will feed a future moat. A small camp rises with a hearth and a smith's tent, because every day on site wants nails, wedges, and mended tools. Food stores move close, and a rough pen for animals follows, so the work crew can stay put when weather turns. Flags flick in the wind where corners could stand. The chalk map on the ground looks simple, but it costs land, coin, and the promise of long labor to make it true. Next, meet the ranks who will turn these pegs and chalk lines into stone that climbs. The bell by the gate rings once, then again. A queue of workers forms in the chill while a scribe checks names on a scuffed board. Boots press into wet clay, and breath hangs pale. A reeve or a foreman notes absences and points new hires to a crew. Inside the yard, the day answers back. Iron rings as chisels spark and bite stone, and a low ox team rumbles past the wall line. Ale mash drifts from a cook tent. Carts carry lime and sand to the mixers. The Lord holds the purse and the right to order walls. Through his steward, he secures timber, lime, and permission to cut stone from nearby ground. The master mason brings the design, sets levels, and decides which stone goes where. The clerk of works keeps the accounts, checks the roll, and minds stores and tools. Foremen split crews and watch corners. Guild hands fill the ranks with stonecutters, carpenters, smiths, carters, and hodmen. The cutters define the tempo. Because skilled stonecutters are scarce, therefore wages spike and schedules slip. Extra labor can haul, mix, and tamp, but it cannot square an archstone. Good cutters sometimes move with the season, trailing news of pay from one strong site to the next. Think of it like a startup org chart written in Latin and mud. HR was a bell and a bench. The bell set the hours. The bench by the gate held the late and the quarrelsome for a talk with a foreman, or a lost half-day if tempers ran hot. Feast days slowed the yard, and Sundays kept heavy work still. Pay runs mixed. Coin is prized, yet bread, ale, and cloth often make up the rest. When the purse sags, corvée labor obligation fills ranks for hauling, lime slaking, and earthwork. Piece rates reward good cutters with steady hands. Day wages cover the carriers and diggers. Tokens and tallies move through rough palms and swap back at the cook tent. Rations steady the long shift and keep men on site when rain closes the fields. On fresh faces, masons' marks cut clean and small. Each sign ties a stone to a pair of hands. The clerk of works walks the courses, counts the marks, and matches them to the roll to keep output and pay fair. A bad joint can be traced, which trims disputes before they spread. The marks also help sort stones by crew. When a wall line snakes around a tower, all of it points back to the rock. Picks score the face, and chisels open seams. Wedges ride drilled holes. Hammers drive until the bed sighs and a block loosens. Crowbars nudge, sleds take the weight, and oxen lean into the yoke for the slow pull to sight. Walk down to the quarry, where the wall begins as boulders. At the quarry face, iron tools score a straight line across pale rock. Holes are pecked with a hammer and a pointed bit. Pairs of thin iron feathers slip in, then a wedge between them. The mason taps in order and listens for a clear ring. The seam starts to open with little pops. This feather and wedge method sets the stone on a fault of our choosing. Taste grit on your teeth and feel the ground thud with each split. Fresh blocks fall rough and heavy. Men trim them just enough for hauling, then reach for levers. Ox teams lower their heads and take the load. Ropes creak as a sledge drags. Rollers made from cut saplings go under the runners. Tracks get brushed with brushwood or planks to keep wheels from sinking. On steep ground, the team switches out, and a capstan or windlass adds pull. Under a smoky bank, a lime kiln eats stacked wood and limestone. The fire runs day and night, turning rock into caustic quicklime. Lime smoke stings the nose. Crews drag hot pieces to a pit and drown them. The slaking hisses and throws steam. The result is a soft white putty that, mixed with sharp sand and water, becomes slaked lime mortar and waits in tubs to mellow. Masons spread that mortar on well-wetted beds and set stone on stone. Because lime mortar cures slowly, therefore walls rise in measured lifts. Courses climb a bit, then stop to rest. The crew moves sideways while yesterday's work hardens. Think of it like baking bread. Rush the proof and stack more dough on top, and the loaf collapses. Gravity always gets the last vote. The craft answers with rules. Beds are leveled so the weight sits true. Joints are thin and fully packed. Faces get tapped to seat with a muffled tone. Plumb lines and masons' levels stay in sight. Foremen watch the weather too, since a hot wind dries the surface too fast and a hard rain washes joints. The core of a thick wall is not all fine work. Dressed ashlar faces the outside, tight and neat for status and rain. Inside the shell, rubble and smaller chunks go in with mortar, filling space and saving the best stone for where it shows. Long bonding stones run across the thickness from face to face. These through stones tie the heart together and make one body out of many bits, reducing the risk of a wall slump if lifts go too fast. The mix of face, core, and bond gives strength, mass, and a decent finish without wasting coin. As courses gain height, the site turns into a rising grid. Carpenters punch putt-log holes and build narrow platforms from round poles and boards. Ladders sway. Hoists rise. A drum with treads, the big wheel you walk inside, takes over the heavy lifts so men can guide and set. Now look up at the latticed staging and the great wheel that handles what arms alone cannot. Take a slow breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Take one more, in through your nose and out through your mouth. Cool morning air brushes your cheek. Hold 3 simple anchors. The ground under your feet. Your hands resting steady and warm. The stone joined by patience. Bedrock under the first courses makes a firm base, so the hill was tested and picked. A cartwheel ticks once and fades. Let the quarry dust settle in your mind. Clear the yard in one exhale. The air smells chalky, then clean. The pace stays unhurried. Nothing is chasing you here. The mortar cures slowly because it needs air to set. Therefore, the next course waits. Think of it like waiting for paint to dry. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Feel the small muscles ease, like a rope uncoiling. The quiet hiss of your bedside kettle keeps the beat. Schedules bend around human hands. Skilled labor is a bottleneck that sets the rhythm. So the crane man, the master mason, and the best cutters decide the day. The line of carts and the stack of tools follow them. Crews pause while scaffolds are moved and planks are checked. Loads wait while the winch is fixed and the hoist rope spliced. Bedrock chosen early still guards the base, solid under the noise. Breath comes easy inside this slow build. Gaps in the wall are not failure, only time doing its part. The mortar will take its days, and the wall will take its seasons. Nothing needs to rush. The next lift will ask for wood and nerve. Posts and braces must stand true, and hearts steady in the thin height. Now step onto the scaffold and feel it move underfoot. A ladder of poles climbs the wall, tier by tier, with planks lashed into walking lanes. The scaffold creaks in little groans, and a handrail shines smooth where hundreds of palms have passed. Boots thud on sap-streaked boards. Chips of grit press under your fingers. Rope slithers through a block high above, and the sound is a soft squeal. Sap smells sweet on the breeze. Rope fibers buzz under tension. Carpenters and masons share this air, trading short calls as a basket of lime rises and a cradle of stone waits its turn. Putlog holes in the walls gape like square mouths, spaced in tidy ranks. Into those go the putlogs, the short beams that tie scaffold to stone, while ledgers run long and level as the main rails. Braces lean in diagonals, and lashings bite tight, so a loaded plank behaves like a shelf with a firm bracket, though everyone still keeps to the middle. Loads are guessed with care, and no one stacks stone near an edge. Because timber was reusable, therefore carpenters guarded it like coin. Timber shortage risk was real in many regions, so they counted every beam and kept it dry when they could. Planks came off a job, got scraped and checked, then went back into racks for the next lift, season after season. Many pieces were marked and remarked, so the same ledger could return to the same duty without fuss. Think of it like building an IKEA bookcase, except your shelves are heirloom planks you have to hand back to the family. Spotless when you're done. OSHA was a prayer. Safety lived in habits and small rules, not papers. Knots were doubled. Lashings got a quick tap with a mallet before anyone stepped out. A lead mason gave a nod. A foreman watched the wind, and taglines waited in careful coils so a swinging stone could be caught and guided. If a plank flexed or a peg squeaked, feet froze, heads turned, and somebody set a wedge. The treadwheel crane stands like a wooden cage beside the tower. 2 men walk inside its broad wheel, and the axle turns a drum. The drum wins the rope, and the block rises inch by inch. The rhythm is steady. Their steps thump, the wheel creaks, and a pawl ticks at the ratchet. A boy on the wall sings the depth as the load nears the course. On the ground, hands hold taglines and keep the stone from spinning, and a brake lever waits if something goes wrong. The whole thing looks simple, but it is a machine that trades muscle for lift. A crane like that can be taken apart, moved, and set up again. The same is true for the scaffold frames. Carpenters scribed numbers onto beam ends, little marks that told which joint met which post, and those marks let the crew build fast without guessing. Reusable frames, numbered beams, and hoists made from familiar parts kept progress steady and safer, and they gave the site a memory you could stack and unstack. Even then, the real limit sat outside the timber yard. Rain glazed planks, wind bullied a hanging load into a twist. Frost made mortar, sulk, and turned ladders slick. A week planned for a tower course could slip into 2 when the air went cold and wet, and wages still needed paying, and animals still needed feed. Clouds pile on the ridge, and the tidy plan fades into puddles. I step off the packed path, and my boot sinks into cold mud. Boot leather squelches at each step. Wet wool hangs from a line and smells like a sheep in the rain. A narrow ditch gurgles beside the foundation trench, brown water sliding past stone. A drainage ditch runs the length of the cut, and a rubble trench sits beneath where the wall will stand. Builders here learn fast, because clay holds water. Therefore, foundations need drains and rubble. Gutters are hacked into the slope to lead torrents away from fresh mortar. Downspouts hang from thatch and canvas to drop water into channels. It is the hill's plumbing, simple and stubborn. It feels like running a stormy music festival, where you lay pallets, pump puddles, and cut lanes through mud or the stage, and the crowd both sink. Mud wins arguments. The camp leans into it anyway. Wattle and daub worker huts huddle on the higher ground, walls patched with straw and earth, roofs pitched low. Cook fires keep a slow heat under iron pots. Latrines sit downwind, dug deep and kept away from the watercourse. Rain ticks on a canvas awning. The whole place keeps a damp shuffle, boards laid from door to door. The work schedule bends with the ground. Frost heave haunts the site once nights turn sharp. Water in the soil freezes and lifts, and that lift can crack a new joint or tilt a set stone by morning. The answer is depth and drainage. Builders dig to firm subsoil, widen the footings, and pack the base with coarse rubble so ice has room to expand without lifting the wall. Lime mortar is touchy here. It needs air and time to set, and damp air slows it like a cold oven, so they nurse small lifts of wall and cover them with straw or skins. A winter storm can put a halt to raising courses. A week of rain can turn hauling into a slog. A wet camp breeds illness, which steals hands from the line and delays spread across pay weeks. Some men develop fevers and flux, and the tally keeps a record of missed days in a quiet, unhappy column. Design choices grow out of this mess. Drains appear not only at the base, but around the yard, running into sumps lined with stone. Gutters are cut into the scaffold roots to keep wash water off the walls. Thresholds sit a little higher to stop splash. A small culvert might be slipped under a service track so carts can pass even after a squall. The mason's plan shifts with the season, and the steward's calendar shifts with it, measuring walls in dry spans and wet. Time is the currency under all this. Every day lost to puddles is wages paid with no lift of stone. Oxen stand idle and still eat. Lime burned on a wet week might sit in tubs waiting for a clear spell, tying up fuel in carts. The steward watches the sky and adjusts the tasks, quarrying in soggy weather, raising in a dry window. The book of accounts listens to the rain almost as closely as the ditch does. Trails of mud run right up to the door where the scores are kept, and the floor is marked with boot prints that dry into pale maps. Let's trail those damp prints toward the room where the tallies are kept. A clerk of works bends over a narrow table and counts cuts and carts by candlelight. Quill scratch meets the room, warm wax beads on a tally, and parchment rasps under the clerk's palm while columns of stone blocks and wagon days line up like drill rows. Stone comes from the nearest workable face, chipped to size at the quarry and hauled by oxen or horses. Timber comes from lorded woods, felled in season and sent as beams, planks, and scaffolds. Iron arrives as nails, cramps, picks, and hoops from local forges, while lime is burned hot in clamp kilns and slaked, then mixed with sand for mortar. Carts need wheels and grease, animals need fodder, masons and diggers need bread, and a bit of ale to keep the day steady. Tally sticks sit in a box, each one a notched strip of wood, split lengthwise so payer and payee carry matching halves. The clerk uses them to track wages, tool issues, and deliveries without much coin on the table. Purveyance orders ride out under a seal when the work is royal, calling in timber, grain, and beasts at fixed rates and at speed. Seasonal bulk buys happen at fairs after harvest, when grain is cheapest, and roads are dry enough to carry heavy loads before the frosts bite. Wages move in slow waves. Some days the pay chest is light, and the clerk writes promises. Because coin ran short, therefore payment shifted to bread, ale, and cloth. A mason might take cloth for a tunic, salt for winter meat, or a pair of shoes from the Lord's stores, and settle the books later with tallies checked and split. Accounts sleep less than lords. Carts bog in ruts after a week of rain. A ford swells, or a single broken axle strands 100 weight of ashlar by the lane. Fields cry out for hands at sowing and harvest, so crews thin and the scaffold goes quiet. Think of it like a startup watching burn rate and runway. When the kiln fires and quarry wages burn fast, the runway is the chest of coin and the grain in the barn. The risk is simple and constant, and everyone knows it. Cash tightens or harvest calls, and a whole season of work shrinks to repairs and guarding what stands. Tools of control try to keep the line straight. The clerk times lime burns for dry weeks, arranges cart strings to leapfrog loads, and books timber felling while sap is low so beams last. Tally sticks capture every change. Purveyance can fill gaps when a town balks, though it can sour a market day. Bulk buys set a floor under winter, yet a late barge or sick ox can tilt the schedule, and the new gatehouse waits while men mend wheels. News of trouble forces the purse and the plan to twist. A rumor of raiders, a levy call, or a siege on a neighbor pulls carts, coin, and men away, and sketches change. A wall meant for a tidy parapet gets an extra walk, an open bailey learns a ditch, and a gatehouse grows thicker cheeks. The money trails follow fear, and the mason string moves with them. Step back outside to see how fear redesigned stone. Breathe in for 4. Let it out for 6, steady and easy. Cool air moves lightly across your hands. Labor, material, and money hold each lift. A master mason sets the sequence and marks lines in chalk. Crews cut, haul, and fit where he points. A treadwheel crane cycles lifts slowly and safely. Men walk inside the wheel as the rope rises, a pin ready to lock when the signal comes. Mortar is mixed in pits and fed up in buckets. The carpenter rigs scaffold with poles and ties. The quarryman sizes blocks to the template and keeps the faces true. Tallies and purveyance steer supplies along roads and rivers. One tally stick is notched and split, so both halves match. Think of tallies like receipts on a clipboard. Carts and barges come when coins move, and they come again when the count is right. Wages keep hands on sight and keep peace. Rope creaks, and the wheel wood hums, while lime dust stings a little in the nose. The yard settles into order. Tools lie in neat rows, and offcuts sit stacked for later fill. A distant bell rings once, then silence returns. Dust lifts, then falls in the light. Water slips through a cut channel at the edge and disappears. Shoulders can drop now. Let the jaw unclench like a latch lifting. Soften around the eyes and mouth. Breath moves smooth and slow. Details can drift if they want. The headline stays simple and clear. People turn stone, timber, and iron into walls, and ledgers keep the rhythm. Because drainage protects foundations from water damage, therefore every ditch and culvert matters even on a dry day. Cash meets carts, so stone and lime arrive. Labor meets tools, so courses climb. The crane's slow cycle keeps heavy moments steady and safer, so the crew trusts the lift. Tallies cut doubt, so disputes fade before they grow. Weather tests each choice, yet patience carries it across seasons. The next turn looks toward shape and safety. Defense pulled lines straight and set edges sharp for a reason. Now, lift your eyes to the gatehouse and see why it bristles. Your finger traces the road below from the top of a half-built gatehouse. The approach bends past a shallow ditch, then narrows at the bridge, so any crowd has to slow and bunch where eyes can watch it. Cold stone sits under your palm, gritty from the mason's chisel. Pitch warms in a small pot by the parapet. Tar's bitter scent edges the air. Flanking towers bracket the entry like bookends that can see each other's targets. Murder holes sit in the passage roof. Arrow slits stitch the walls, and a heavy portcullis waits at the outer mouth. A portcullis with groove channels means the grill can slam or inch, then lock in place. A test chain rattles against an iron grill. Because fire and rams targeted gates, therefore, gatehouses became layered traps. Think of it like a security update after a breach that sent everyone back to the settings menu. Welcome to Customer Feedback, the Siege Edition. Machicolations. Over the gate, let defenders tip stones or hot sand straight down, keeping hands off ladders and torches. Arrow slits give narrow views out and safe angles in. A second portcullis inside can seal the passage again, so anyone who breaks the first door meets a stone hallway with rain from above and shafts from the sides. Second and third walls ring the core like nested bowls, each one making the last harder to reach. Curved towers reduce blind spots on the field, and their shape shrugs off the corners that catch impact. Dead ground risk minimized by flanking fire. Small sally ports hide in the curtain, sized for quick sorties that hit a camp line, snag a ladder, then vanish before a horn can muster a full chase. Defensive choices thicken with every siege story told at a winter table. After a battering ram, the next gate is longer and more crooked. After a ladder rush, parapets grow taller and shields on rails appear. After a fire, timber ceilings give way to stone vaults over passages. Design here is iterated by fear and memory, not fashion. Account books echo the same lessons. After one bad season, builders order more iron for hinges and spikes, and shift stone to a smoother quarry when the last batch cracked. Teams drill gate drills, test drop speeds, and mark where the angles overlap. So the map of fire and stone becomes a habit in the body, not a sketch on parchment. Keys soon pass to a castellan, and the walls change from project to responsibility. The lords want show, the garrison wants repairs, and the masons keep a foothold. Finishing stairs, setting drains, fiddling with the winch. We head back inside to catch the rhythm of life once the ribbon is cut, but the work quietly carries on. Lime wash dries on the new stone in the great hall. A hearth smolders low along the side wall. Hearth smoke curls toward a blackened beam. Benches stand in neat lines. The fresh walls feel cold, but the coals give a steady heat. Iron hinges groan on the heavy door. You can taste chalk in the air. A steward crosses the floor with a register tucked under his arm. Servants slide stools, and the scrape skims the rushes. A dog tucks itself by the warm ash. Down in the storerooms, there are stores of grain, salt, and ale for the garrison. The bakehouse turns dough into loaves before dawn. The brewhouse keeps small beer moving through tubs and tons. Ovens glow, and the cook counts out rations by habit. A porter notes what goes in and out. Because a castle is a system, therefore it demands constant repair and staff. Lime wash flakes and must be brushed and renewed. Roofs lift in storms and need carpenters. Gate timbers swell, hinges wear, gutters clog, and paths sink into mud after rain. The ongoing maintenance cost is a steady burden on the Lord's purse, which pulls on rents, tolls, and favors. Think of it like owning a pool that thinks it's a town. Grand opening, then the to-do list grows. Inside the walls sits a well where the water runs cool in the shade. A bucket chain clacks at the wellhead. In dry places, a cistern catches roof water in a deep tank. Garderobes empty into a pit or the outer ditch, and a hired crew hauls it away on dull mornings. Guardrooms hug the gate and keep watch in turns, with a bell for alarms and a word for the night. The steward tallies, stores, the marshal calls the muster, and the porter locks the wicket at curfew. In peace, the place governs. Dues are counted, judgments are heard, and the hall hosts ordinary talk and careful feasts. With gunpowder, walls lower and thicken, and towers gain odd mouths for guns. Some castles cut new gun ports and earthworks and live on. Others see their stones carted to town, or they turn into manors, prisons, depots, or quiet farms. The shape shifts, but the need for upkeep never does. Even on a calm night, the hall settles and the embers click. The kettle hiss in your room is softer than the draft in a stair. Tools stop, doors are barred, and the last ladle hangs still. Let the tools go quiet now and drift back to the small sounds of your room. One slow exhale. From a scraped line on rough ground to the keep on the hill, we watched the rise. Stakes went in. Carts rolled. Stone found its course. Sun dried throats, and the walls rose all the same. It began as marks and orders, then became rooms within walls. This late hour sits quiet with you. Thank you for lending the steady minutes and that calm attention that carries long jobs. Work like this needs watchful minds as much as hands, even in a story. We shared the site in quiet, step by step, without hurry. Patience laid more stone than pageantry. Trumpets did not raise towers. Small choices, counted coins, and careful lifts did, day after day. The shape of power came from slow work, not bright show. Every lord asked for speed, yet crews moved at the safest pace. Delays came, yet lifts kept coming. Tired eyes can let the edges soften now. Let the names and tools fade back into the dust while the feeling of steady effort stays warm. If a worry knocks, set it outside the gate and let the drawbridge rest. Sleep can take over. Let your breath fall easy, in and out. A small favor if this kept you company. Tap like and subscribe if you